Welcome in the latest episode of 5 on the Floor, the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app. We're on Podbean, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. We're also on Dash Radio on their Nothing But Net channel. That's every single weeknight at 7 p.m. Also, check out 5 Reasons YouTube. We've got all kinds of Heat content there, but also our UFC content kind of went through the roof this weekend. Find out why. Check that out. That's also where we're going to be housing 5 Reasons Sports Talk, which you're going to find there starting in late July. Alex Dono's show is debuting on July 29th, and I might have some news for you also. 5reasonsports.com. Spell it out, F-I-V-E, reasonsports.com. That's where you find the latest from Brady Hawk as a breakdown of Bam Adebayo, past, present, and future on Bam's birthday today as we're recording this episode. It's not what the episode's about, but check out the story and also check out the great sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. That includes our friends over at Miami Grill. The only thing better than cheering against the Bucks, and I know some of you are still doing that, is doing it with your favorite wings. Miami Grill's got you covered. Bring home a platter of your faves to share for the game tonight, just how you like them. Crispy, grilled, naked, or boneless, and sauce of perfection with one of 3 new sauces. It's mango habanero, honey garlic, and Nashville hot. If you can't decide, get them all delivered with a catering order. There's more than just wings, too. Order for the whole family, cheesesteaks, gyros, burgers, and more. And don't forget, for a limited time, you can get your Miami Grill collectible cup featuring artwork by 4 different Wynwood Mural Fest artists. Collect all 4, buy it for $2.99, or upgrade your meal deal to a larger size for $2.99. Get more fries and the cup. Order online or in person. Miami Grill, you can do it pickup, drive-through, dine-in, and delivery at all locations. Visit mymiamigrill.com for more details. Miami Grill, if you're craving it, they're making it. And now, tonight's episode.
Down the Biscayne. Yeah. 5 on the floor, ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing, you can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs. Just like Buck said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the floor playing, got it all band. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, it's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, and Alex Toledo, plus others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
All right, Ethan Skolnick back on 5 on the Floor. Here's tonight's floor plan. Just 2 of us. Alex will be back with us during the week. We'll also have a couple of other guest hosts that will be with us. Again, we're continuing to go here up through free agency. We're not that far away. We're only a couple of weeks away at this stage. We're going to focus on a central question here, which kind of colors the entire debate about what players that the Heat pursue this offseason, which is this. And this, Greg and I agree on most things. I think we disagree on this. And the question is this. The question is, do the Heat need a point guard above all else? Like, is that the one thing that is missing on the roster right now, a hole that needs to be filled? We know that Kendrick Nunn is not really a point guard and that he is a pending restricted free agent. And it looks like it's as likely that he could be signed and traded somewhere as it is that he'll actually be retained by the Heat. We know that Goran Dragic is in the last year. Well, he could be in the last year of his contract, or there could be an opt-in by the team, but that he hasn't really ever been a true point guard, even though we classify him that way. And now he's on more minutes restrictions. He's coming off the bench. He did it during the bubble run, but he can't be expected to do it consistently going forward. Jimmy Butler has played point guard ostensibly in the starting lineup, which is a role that no other team had really had him playing, but he's not a true point guard. And of course, Bam Adebayo has been used as a point center, particularly in certain sets and to bring the ball up the floor. But of course, again, he's not a point guard. And so my feeling is this, Greg, they need a point guard. They have needed a point guard for years. And I don't think that the bubble run obscures it because, again, Goran Dragic played like a point guard during that run. Covering this team since 1996, I saw what a point guard does for you, what Tim Hardaway did for them, settling the offense, getting the ball to the right spots. Now, the game has changed. Obviously, more point guards are now sort of score first, although Timmy was, particularly before he got to Miami. But also, point guards still know how to get you into offense. And we've seen in the USA, with the USA team, that Lillard, being the only guy, has not really panned out so far. Now they're waiting on Drew Holiday, who, while he may be a champion soon, is not really a true point guard either. I say they need a true point guard, okay? You do not, above all else, right? Why do you feel that way?
Yeah. So the above all else is the key component here, because I really agree with basically everything you said, to be honest. I think that that's absolutely a hole on the roster. It's something they have to address, but there's a lot of layers to this. So like, I acknowledge that. So like when we apply these layers, maybe it'll be a little more cut and dry as to where I'm going, because I think really the primary thing that this team needs more than anything else, if you're telling me the one thing, it's a dynamic 3-level scorer of some kind. And even if it's a guy who can just do it in spurts, but is relatively hot most nights, like a Colin Sexton, like that build. If you're not getting like Kyle Lowry was so, to me, it's so attractive because he does the point guard stuff, but he also can score for you. So you're kind of getting both of those things. If you're not getting Lowry and you have to look around the market, I don't know that these other names are guys that I would want to sink my primary assets towards. I'd rather get a 3-level scorer and then see if maybe you can get a true point guard to settle things down. Maybe that's as a reserve versus like a starter.
So let's go through some of the options. We're going to do this in 2 parts. One, we'll go through some of the free agent options, and then after the break, we will go through some of the trade options. Here are the free agent options, and we've talked about a lot of these. Lowry is that guy, provided you're comfortable with his age. That's and his price. I mean, that's really it. I mean, Kyle Lowry doesn't have to prove himself as a floor general. He's done it. The questions about him in the playoffs and not being clutch, which were real, really struggled, if you remember, in that playoff series against the Heat and prior to that. But he obviously is a champion now, and he was, the second or third best player on a championship team. So, I mean, he's minted as that. But then you go through the rest of the list. We've talked about Mike Conley, who's a personal favorite of mine, of the Heat organization. He is that type of point guard. Utah missed him greatly when he was not there. But also he had a bad year the year before, so maybe he struggles with adjustments, which is something to consider because he played in Memphis other than that his entire career. And so it does become a little bit of a question kind of with that. And again, it's a price issue. Then you get to Lonzo Ball. We know that Pat Riley likes, but is not a sort of attack the defense type point guard at this stage. He became a much better catch and shoot player. He's become a good defender. He gives you some size, but he's not the type of guy who's going to break down your defense. Then you get to Spencer Dinwiddie. Has some interesting traits, he's not particularly efficient, and he's coming off a major injury, but he has some leadership traits, and the Nets played well with him at point guard. Dennis Schroeder kind of disappeared when the Lakers needed him most. Has always been better kind of in a secondary role. In some ways, it's similar to Reggie Jackson, although Reggie Jackson stepped up in the postseason this time. But both of them are guys who can get you buckets, do some of the 3-level scoring stuff that you talked about, but neither of them is always all that efficient. And I don't think either of them is your true prototype point guard. And then before we finish out this list, and then I'll go to you on some of these names, Derrick Rose, who had a really a fantastic year, and I thought the Heat should have gone in on in a more significant way, seems to be over the injuries, does give you some of those leadership qualities, has been a point guard at a high level, and teammates seem to like playing with him, but he's never been a particularly efficient long-range shooter or a particularly good on-ball defender.
Yeah.
Right.
Or a real point guard. And that's like
right.
where when we start to get to these last names, like Devontae Graham, who's a restricted free agent in Charlotte, who has upside as a young player, TJ McConnell, a Jimmy favorite. I personally like that. Yeah. But now we're totally moving off of like what top priority they would be in free agency. Cause TJ McConnell's not someone you're signing on day one. Cameron Payne, Patty Mills, guys like that. It's an interesting mix, and that's where I just get hung up. I feel like after Lowry and maybe Conley to some degree, but still paying Conley the same amount that I would pay Lowry, it doesn't feel like the same type of win now move that really will move the needle. So for me, like after that, if you can't get Lowry, to me, maybe you get McConnell with some exception money, and I would go elsewhere. I'd try to get a 3-level score.
But doesn't this make the case then? Okay. Doesn't this make the case that you have to pay Lowry or Conley? Because if you don't get one of them, and we'll talk about trades in a minute, but if you don't get one of them, you're not going to get anybody who solves what may have been their biggest problem last year, which is that they struggle to score because they can't get into conventional sets. They don't have great pick and roll players. And I'm going to raise one other point. If what we're talking about is Jimmy's window, Jimmy's longevity, okay, then I don't want Jimmy playing point guard on a consistent basis. It is more of a burden on his body, I think, True. Ultimately, right?
And Bam's development.
Both of them. But Jimmy to be picked up full court at times, to have to sort of shoulder off somebody just to get into a set. Like, I'd rather Jimmy be freer to roam, to cut, to do those kind of things. So I think there's a bigger thing at play here. And I also think that at times, if we had, the Heat, if the Heat had a true, I'm doing this with you too long. If the Heat had a true point guard that, we wouldn't have some of these situations where it seems like Jimmy can't figure out whether he wants to be aggressive or not be aggressive or
That's
whatever.
True.
The point guard would put him in the position to do it. And the same with Bam. To me, all of that, and we'll talk about trade targets in a second, points to you pay Lowry or Conley whatever it is they want. Because I look at the rest of it, I don't think, look, part of this to me is also with Bam is having a point guard who can get in Bam's face and say, we need you to be a scorer. We need you to do this or that. The only three guys on this list who have the gravitas to do that are Lowry, Conley, and Rose. That's it.
Maybe Dinwiddie, maybe because of his point of view around the league. I don't know, but
he has a personality, but he's never done it at a high level, though. That's the thing.
Right.
I mean,
you're right.
Rose, Lowry, and Conley have done it. Lowry quarterbacked a lot of very good playoff teams. Obviously, Kyle's won a championship, and Derek. I mean, everybody knows what Derek would have been if not for what happened. And I think we talk about the off the court stuff. But as far as his on the court story, I think is very admirable. The fact that he's gotten himself back to this position. So I would make the case that the scarcity of the type of player that the Heat need means that you have to go pay Lowry or Conley. That's where I come down on this.
To me, so because we're going to pivot to the next side of this, it's Lowry, or we need to completely focus our attention on the next group of players that we'll talk about after the break.
Okay, so we're going to do that here in a second. Before we do, I want to tell you about another great sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. That's our friends over at MyBookie. You can go to mybookie.ag. Stanley Cup playoffs are over with. Obviously, U.S. Open golf was today. However, NBA playoffs still going on for a little bit of time. You can still bet the MLB games. You can still bet the MMA and the rest of the combat sports. And you got to use the promo code 5. So use the promo code 5, F-I-V-E, F-I-V-E. You can bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie. They have the best platform, and they give you the best live betting. So during the games, if you're hedging one way, you want to go the other direction, you can play it. They got all the futures on there. Check out the Dolphins futures right now. I think you may want to go over on that one. Sign up, use the promo code 5, F-I-V-E. Receive up to $1,000 bonus along with your first deposit at mybookie.ag. South Florida sports fans are always complaining that people underrate the teams. So bet on them. Show that you believe in them. Go to mybookie.ag. Use the code FIVE. Get yourself that bonus. All right, let's go through the rest of these names here. And some of these are not really point guards. This, again, is the definition of position, right? Okay, so Colin Sexton, we've done numerous episodes on that. People are piggybacking on all of our reporting, which we've been doing here for the past 3 weeks. We know that the Heat have an interest. We know that Colin Sexton has an interest in the Heat. We know that there could be Kevin Love involved in a trade. There might not be Kevin Love involved in a trade, but we know that this is a legitimate possibility for the Heat. They like him. He's also not really a point guard. Malcolm Brogdon is kind of a point guard by leadership quality and all the rest of this, but he's also not a break down the defense type player as much. To me, Malcolm Brogdon is like, and I'm sorry because I have sinned, he's like a supercharged version of Mario Chalmers. Like, to me, he's got leadership qualities. He was a long-term college player.
I like him better than any of the guys other than Lowry on the list that we discussed in the first segment.
Yeah, and look, and he has more scoring chops than Mario had. But what I mean by that is that he's a guy who might play off the ball as much as he plays on the ball. To me, Malcolm Brogdon is the perfect fit next to a superstar two guard, which, they don't really have in Indiana. Levert's pretty good. and I don't know if you really have in Miami because I don't know what Jimmy plays, but anyway, it's Malcolm Brogdon there. Derek White, you had on here. Devontae Murray.
Yeah, it's the Spurs situation there because both of those guys have been made available. So, you'd have to take the clutch stuff into consideration.
Well,
Devontae Murray.
The clutch stuff is still a problem. CJ McCollum is who we have on a list, but he's not a point guard. He's an elite guard. He's also extremely expensive. That's.
I like that idea, though. I think that CJ McCollum could help this team if they end up striking out in a couple other directions.
Well, he is a 3-level scorer. He
Correct,
is a 3-level
exactly.
scorer, and he did serve to a degree as Portland's backup point guard, so he could handle that secondary ball handling role, but he doesn't handle the primary. Eric Bledsoe, you put on the list, and you wrote ooh, and I'm kind of like with you on that. I think the Eric Bledsoe ship has sailed.
If it comes with Brandon Ingram, we could do it.
Is Bledsoe not also clutch?
He probably still is. I don't believe that he's changed representation.
George Hill.
Stopgap. See, that's what I mean. Like now we're getting to these stopgap names. Terry Rozier, I thought was interesting because is Charlotte really going to keep him around? Mm-hmm. Maybe. And then the big money guys, John Wall, Russell Westbrook. Like I bet you could.
I don't think Russ is going anywhere.
Yeah, I agree. I felt like that they ended on a good note there. They're going to try to do things with Bradley Beal. So it really comes down to those first two names, Sexton and Malcolm Brogdon, maybe the Spurs guys and McCollum if all of a sudden the situation in Portland gets weird. And the one point guard we didn't talk about all episode and we're not going to is Dame Lillard, as another option. But I just like that group and sinking money and allocating resources, meaning percentage of your cap to the guys we just talked about versus those options in free agency.
Well, I'm with you, but again, you're not getting a true point guard in that group unless it's Brogdon, and you can call him that. It's Sexton is not that.
You're right,
and I have real reasons to like Sexton. Age, efficiency, got much better, work ethic.
You'd have to have a TJ McConnell on the roster, some kind of real point guard, to like settle things.
Well, they just have never. Look, when Beno Udrih was on the roster for a few weeks, like just seeing what a point guard does. I remember, and we've had Norris on the pod, but I remember when Norris first broke in, and I wrote off his first. It was the first scrimmage. They do that red and black scrimmage, and my whole column was about how. Oh my God, it's a point guard because they hadn't really let Rio play point guard. And I was watching Norris run an offense and I'm like, he knows how to play point guard. And again, Norris, also had to play off of LeBron and Dwayne. So it was a different situation, but this is not an organization that has, which is weird because if you look at Riley's history and we've discussed it, he inherited Magic, but then he brought in Derek Harper, Doc Rivers in New York, right? Greg Anthony. These are point guards. Okay. Mark Jackson was kind of jettisoned, but the others were all there. And then in Miami, the first major movie made after Zoe was Tim.
Yeah. And then recycling, like every year there'd be a different backup point guard, Eric Murdoch, Terry Porter. Like they went through the list,
Rod Strickland, Carter, Travis Best.
Yep.
A whole bunch of guys played point. Even Crotty. They had a bunch of point guards who, that was the thing with those 4 years against the Knicks. They had 4 different backup point guards, but they were all important. Like you mentioned, Terry Porter was big, Murdoch was big, Crotty, and then Anthony Carter was the last one. Like he's always valued point guards. And then I guess the big 3 era, the ball in Dwayne and LeBron's hands, Rio and Norris playing off the ball. And then since, they don't really have, Dragic, but again, Dragic is a scorer first. And especially now, I think what you're looking for Goran, if Goran's going to be here, is bursts, scoring bursts. Okay. You're not putting you're not giving him the keys for a season. You might for a game, for a quarter, for a playoff series, perhaps against the right opponent, but not for a season. And so
that's why you can't make $20 million anymore.
That's another conversation, and that's a tougher one, which we're going to have. I will say this: I think they're going to end up with Kyle Lowry. So I think this is going to be moot. I still think that's the direction that this heads, and I think if they don't, then the most likely next option is probably the trade for Sexton. Which is a different direction than Lowry. But I think those all more likely than Mike Conley or Lonzo Ball or any of these other guys or Schroeder or Reggie Jackson ending up here. I don't really
agree.
Yeah, I don't really see that. I think this is more about Kyle. But it's an interesting debate, and I do think we're past the point. Jimmy and Bam playing point guard. I'm over it. I think it's something you should have in your arsenal. It should not be your entire arsenal. That's how I view it.
You might have won me over by the end of this now.
Right, check it out. Miami Grill. Check that out. Go to mymiamigrill.com, mybookie.ag. Use the code 5. We always mention at the end, Prize Picks, Daily Fantasy. Use that code FIVE.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Regional Sports Network.